A flight attendant slapped me across the face in front of a whole first-class cabin because, in her words, people like me didn't belong there. The sting of her hand wasn't half as painful as the looks from the passengers who pretended not to see. I demanded to speak to the captain, but instead, they threatened to handcuff me like I was the criminal. Before we even took off, a twisted video of the incident hit the internet, making it look like I was the aggressor. My phone started lighting up with messages, my reputation, my entire future, dangling by a thread. What nobody on that plane knew was the truth that burned inside me. I owned the airline. I had signed the papers days before, in a deal worth millions. And if they thought they could slap me, humiliate me, and bury me without consequences, they were about to find out exactly who they'd messed with, and this time they wouldn't see me coming. But let's start at the beginning. Before we dive in, let me know where in the world you're listening from today. I'd been looking forward to this flight for weeks, not because I was excited about the destination. I'd been to London dozens of times for business, but because this was the first time I'd be flying on my own airline. Well, technically my airline, though nobody on the plane knew that yet. The acquisition had been finalized just 3 days ago, and we'd agreed to keep it quiet until the transition team could properly take over. Atlantic Airways was now mine, though the press release wouldn't go out for another week. I'd paid a premium to acquire the struggling carrier, seeing potential where others saw only red ink and outdated systems. As I settled into seat 2A in first class, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. 10 years ago, I was coding in my apartment, living on ramen and ambition. Now my tech company had expanded enough to diversify into transportation. The leather seat beneath me represented more than just a comfortable ride across the Atlantic. It was tangible proof of how far I'd come. "Can I take your jacket, sir?" A flight attendant with a practiced smile appeared at my side. "Thank you." I handed over my tailored blazer and settled back, trying not to look too much like I was inspecting everything. The cabin needed updating. The entertainment systems were at least 2 generations behind, and I'd already spotted 3 efficiency issues with the boarding process, all things I planned to fix. The first-class cabin was only half full, another problem I intended to address. A businessman across the aisle tapped away on his laptop, while an elderly couple near the front whispered to each other over glasses of pre-flight champagne. The atmosphere was calm, exclusive, and exactly what you'd expect from a premium cabin. That calm shattered in an instant. "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" I looked up to find another flight attendant standing over me. Her name tag read, Harper. Mid-40s, blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to strain against her scalp. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Just getting settled in," I replied, returning her smile with one of my own. "Is there a problem?" Her eyes narrowed as she glanced down at my boarding pass on the armrest. "This is first class," she said, her voice carrying enough to make several passengers look up. "Yes, I'm aware." I kept my tone light, professional. I'd faced this kind of scrutiny before. Seat 2A. There must be some mistake. Harper's lips thinned to a tight line. These seats are very expensive. The cabin had gone quiet. I felt heat creeping up my neck but maintained my composure. "No mistake. Would you like to scan my boarding pass again?" Something dark flickered across her face. "People like you don't belong in first class." My stomach tightened. I'd heard variations of this before, but never so blatantly, never from someone in a service position. "I'm sorry, what exactly do you mean by people like me?" Instead of answering, she snatched my boarding pass and studied it with exaggerated scrutiny. "This doesn't look right." "I assure you it is." My voice remained steady even as my pulse quickened. "I'm a frequent flyer with your airline." "Our airline," she corrected with a sneer, "and we reserve the right to reassign seating as necessary." I took a deep breath. I could end this with a single sentence, "I own this airline," but that would violate the confidentiality agreement and potentially throw the entire acquisition into chaos. The transition was delicate and I couldn't risk it, not even to put this woman in her place. "If there's a concern, perhaps we could discuss it privately," I suggested. Her response came not in words but in action. The slap landed with such force that my head snapped to the side. The sound cracked through the cabin like a gunshot. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Then gasps rippled through first class. My cheek burned, and I tasted blood where my teeth had cut into my inner lip. "Know your place," Harper hissed, low enough that only I could hear. I sat frozen, shock giving way to a cold, calculating anger. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to tell her exactly who I was, that her career, this entire airline, was now in my hands. But I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I dabbed at my lip with the cocktail napkin from my tray, the white linen coming away stained red. "I believe I do know my place," I said quietly. "It's right here in seat 2A. The elderly woman across the aisle was staring open-mouthed. The businessman had stopped typing. Even the other flight attendant had frozen in the galley doorway, horror evident on her face. Harper seemed to suddenly realize she had an audience. Her expression shifted, a mask of professionalism sliding into place, though her eyes still burned with contempt. "I'll need to speak with the captain about this," she said, as if she hadn't just assaulted a passenger. As she stalked away, I gently touched my cheek, mind racing. This wasn't just about a slap or casual racism. This incident could unravel everything if handled wrong. If I reacted as I wanted to, as I had every right to, it would raise questions about who I was, why I wasn't pressing charges, why the airline was so quick to accommodate me. And we were still on the ground. The flight to London was 10 hours long. I had a decision to make, and quickly. The taste of blood in my mouth made one thing clear. This was just the beginning. I dabbed at my lip again, the shock giving way to a simmering anger that threatened to boil over. Around me, first-class passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances, a few tapping furiously on their phones. I needed to get control of this situation before it spiraled further. "I'd like to speak with the captain," I said firmly as Harper returned from the galley. "What just happened is completely unacceptable." Her eyebrows arched with theatrical surprise. "You want to speak with the captain? About what exactly?" "About you assaulting me," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the throbbing in my cheek. "That was assault, Miss Harper. Plain and simple." She gave a dismissive laugh that made my blood pressure spike. "Sir, I think you're confused. I was simply helping you find your correct seat assignment." "By slapping me across the face?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "I did no such thing." Her denial was smooth, practiced. "You became agitated when I explained company policy. Several witnesses saw your behavior." I looked around, expecting support, but found most passengers suddenly fascinated by their magazines or the views outside their windows. Only the elderly woman across the aisle met my gaze, her expression troubled but hesitant. "This is ridiculous," I said. "Everyone here saw what happened." A male flight attendant appeared at Harper's side, tall, broad-shouldered, with a military-style haircut. His name tag read, Davis. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his question directed at Harper rather than me. "Our friend here is demanding to speak with Captain Reynolds," she replied. "Says I hit him." She rolled her eyes dramatically. Davis assessed me with a cold stare. "Sir, the captain is preparing for departure. He can't be disturbed for misunderstandings." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," I insisted. "She struck me. I have a right to report this incident." "And we have procedures for handling disruptive passengers," Davis countered, his hand moving to rest on something at his belt. With a small shock, I realized he was touching restraints. Plastic handcuffs used for security incidents. The implied threat couldn't have been clearer. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. They were gaslighting me, and worse, threatening me if I didn't back down. The surreal injustice of it all made my head spin. 20 minutes ago, I'd been excited about this flight, about seeing how my new acquisition operated from a customer perspective. Now I was being threatened with restraints. "Are you seriously threatening to handcuff me because I asked to report being assaulted?" I kept my voice low, controlled. Davis leaned closer. "Sir, I'm simply informing you that if you continue to disrupt the boarding process, we have protocols. Now, Can I get you something to drink before takeoff? Or would you prefer to deplane and book another flight? I weighed my options quickly. I could reveal who I was. That would end this farce immediately. But doing so would violate the terms of the acquisition agreement. The airline's board and I had agreed to keep the ownership change quiet until the transition was complete. Going public now would trigger clauses that could cost me millions, possibly even unravel the deal entirely. And something told me this wasn't just about one racist flight attendant. The way Davis had appeared so quickly, their coordinated response, it felt rehearsed, systematic. If this was happening to me in first class, what was happening to other passengers? I needed evidence. I needed to understand how deep this rot went. "I'll have a sparkling water," I finally said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes, and perhaps some ice for my face. Relief flickered across Davis's features. He'd expected more resistance. "Coming right up, sir." As they moved away, I noticed a middle-aged man across the aisle had his phone out, angled in my direction. He wasn't being subtle about recording. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "Did you happen to catch what just happened?" He lowered his phone slightly, his expression guarded. "Yeah, I got most of it. You were pretty aggressive with her." My mouth fell open. "Aggressive?" "She slapped me." He shrugged. "Look, I just record what I see. From where I'm sitting, you were making demands, raising your voice. She was just doing her job." The realization hit me like a second slap. He'd started recording after the assault. All he had was my reaction, not what provoked it. And from his tone, he'd already decided who the villain was in this scenario. Dread coiled in my gut as I realized how this would look if posted online, entitled "Passenger Berating Airline Staff." The narrative would be written before I could even respond. In the current climate of viral outrage, context was the first casualty. I turned away, feeling trapped. The doors had closed now, the safety briefing beginning. We were pushing back from the gate, and I was sealed in this metal tube for the next 10 hours with people who had just assaulted me, threatened me, and were potentially building a case against me. My phone buzzed with a message from my assistant confirming tomorrow's meeting with the airline's executive team, a meeting where I would be revealed as their new owner. The irony wasn't lost on me. I slipped my phone into airplane mode and pressed the cold pack Davis had reluctantly provided against my cheek. I would bide my time, document everything. And when the moment was right, this wouldn't just be about one flight attendant or one incident. This would be about changing an entire culture. I was just settling into an uneasy calm when the Wi-Fi indicator lit up on the seatback screen. 3 hours into the flight, we'd reached cruising altitude, and the captain had turned on the in-flight connectivity. I connected my phone, hoping to distract myself with work emails until landing. The notification hit me like a punch to the gut. 17 messages from my PR director, Alicia. 3 from my lawyer. 5 missed calls. Something was very wrong. I opened Alicia's most recent text. "Call me immediately. Video going viral. Bad." My fingers trembled slightly as I clicked the link she'd sent. The loading circle spun for what felt like an eternity before the video filled my screen. There I was, my face contorted with anger, voice raised as I demanded to speak to the captain. The footage started conveniently after Harper's assault, showing only my reaction, making me look unhinged, entitled, aggressive. The caption read, "Entitled tech bro harasses female flight attendant who was just doing her job. Twitter, do your thing. Airline Karen, Anderstra, privilege on display." It already had 50,000 views and was climbing by the second. "No, no, no," I whispered, scrolling through the comments. "Another rich jerk thinking rules don't apply to him." "I recognize him. Isn't that the CEO of Innovate Tech? Someone should start a petition to get him fired." My stomach dropped. People were identifying me, connecting this to my company, and worse, connecting it to the airline I'd just acquired. I scrolled further and froze. Someone had posted, "Isn't this the airline that just got bought out by some mystery investor? Board must be thrilled with this PR nightmare." Cold sweat broke out across my forehead. The acquisition agreement had a reputation clause. If anything happened that significantly damaged the airline's public image before the formal announcement, The board could void the entire deal. They had until midnight tonight to exercise that option. I checked the time, 2:17 p.m., just under 10 hours before the clause expired. I opened my email and saw a message from one of the board members, time-stamped 20 minutes ago. Concerning video circulating, emergency meeting called for 6 p.m., please explain. They didn't know yet. They didn't know I was the passenger in the video or that I was on this very flight. But they would soon enough. The internet was already connecting the dots. Years of work, hundreds of millions in investment capital, my entire strategy for expanding into the transportation sector, all of it hanging by a thread because of one racist flight attendant and a misleadingly edited video. I needed to contain this. Now, first I had to call Alicia. I slipped on my noise-canceling headphones and dialed her number. Thank God, she answered immediately. Please tell me you've seen it. I've seen it, I confirmed, keeping my voice low. It's bad, but it's not the whole story. The attendant slapped me across the face before the video started. This is a complete misrepresentation. Jesus, she breathed. Are you okay? Physically, yes, but Alicia, the board's called an emergency meeting. If they connect me to this video before midnight, the reputation clause, I know. Her voice shifted into crisis mode. Where are you now? Still on the flight, we're not landing for another 7 hours. 7 hours? The panic in her voice mirrored my own internal state. We don't have 7 hours. This thing is spreading like wildfire. Can we issue a statement? Explain what really happened? Without evidence? It would look defensive and it would confirm you're the passenger. Right now, there's still plausible deniability. Some people think it's you, but it's not confirmed. The plane suddenly dropped, making my stomach lurch. The seatbelt sign dinged on as the captain's voice came over the intercom. Folks, we're hitting some unexpected turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. The plane shuddered again, more violently this time. Drinks sloshed in cups, and a few passengers gasped. What was that? Alicia asked. Turbulence, I explained, gripping my armrest. And it's getting worse. The plane dipped again, and this time I could feel the distinct sensation of descent. My ears popped painfully as the captain's voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be descending to a lower altitude to avoid this weather system. We apologize for any discomfort. They're changing altitude, I told Alicia, dread building in my chest, which means we'll be landing even later than scheduled. You need to get off that plane as soon as possible, she said firmly. The board meeting is in less than 4 hours. If they make the connection before you can explain your side. I know. I cut her off, my mind racing. But we're still over the Atlantic. There's nowhere to land. Another bout of turbulence rocked the cabin. A child started crying somewhere behind me. Through my window, I could see dark clouds surrounding us, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating the gloom. The weather's getting worse, I murmured, more to myself than to Alicia. This isn't just a quick descent. Something's wrong. As if confirming my fears, the oxygen mask suddenly dropped from the ceiling compartments, dangling in front of every passenger. Panicked voices rose throughout the cabin. What's happening? Alicia's voice sounded tiny through my headphones. I have to go, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. The oxygen mask's just deployed. I'll call you when I can. I hung up before she could respond, staring at the swinging mask in front of me. The situation had just gone from professionally catastrophic to potentially life-threatening. And somewhere in the chaos of my thoughts, a terrible realization formed. Landing wouldn't just escalate my PR nightmare anymore. It might be our only hope of survival. The landing gear kissed the tarmac with a jolt that matched the knot in my stomach. I'd never been so eager to get off a plane in my life. My phone was practically burning a hole in my pocket, notifications still pouring in as that manipulated video spread like wildfire across social platforms. Every ping felt like another nail in the coffin of my acquisition deal. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Denver International Airport. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Local time is 4:37 p.m. Please remain seated until we've reached the gate and the seatbelt sign has been turned off. I kept my head down, strategizing my next move. Get off the plane first. Find a quiet corner. Call my legal team. Contain this disaster before the board caught wind of it. Simple enough, right? The seatbelt sign dinged off and I stood quickly, grabbing my carry-on from the overhead bin. Ms. Harper was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in the galley, knowing what she'd done. Good. I didn't need another confrontation. "Sir, you have a pleasant evening now," said the other flight attendant at the door, the one who'd threatened me with handcuffs. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I nodded curtly and strode into the jetway. My heart rate finally began to slow. Just a few more steps and I'd be in the terminal, anonymous among thousands of travelers. I'd find somewhere quiet to make my calls and, "Excuse me, sir?" A stocky man in a navy blue uniform stepped directly into my path, flanked by two others in similar attire. Their faces were professionally blank, but something in their stance made my skin prickle. "Yes?" I kept my voice neutral, though my pulse immediately kicked back up. "I'm Officer Daniels with Airport Security. Would you mind stepping aside with us for a moment? You've been randomly selected for additional screening." Random. Right. I glanced past them toward the terminal, calculating my options. Making a scene would only compound my problems. "Is there an issue?" I asked, knowing full well there was. "Just procedure, sir," said Daniels, though his eyes told a different story. "This way, please." I followed them through a side door marked Authorized Personnel Only, acutely aware of the curious stares from other passengers filing past. Whispers followed me like shadows. "Isn't that the guy from the video? The one who attacked the flight attendant? Can you believe some people?" Each comment was a tiny dagger. Shame burned under my skin despite my innocence. I'd spent my entire career building a reputation of integrity, and now strangers were looking at me like I was something scraped off the bottom of a shoe. They led me down a sterile hallway to a small room with a metal table and 3 chairs. No windows. 1 door. My lawyer's voice echoed in my head. "Don't say anything without representation." But I wasn't under arrest, at least not yet. "Have a seat, sir." Daniels gestured to the lone chair on one side of the table. I sat, placing my carry-on beside me. "How long will this take?" "I have a connecting flight." "That depends on your cooperation," said the second officer, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper cheekbones. Her name tag read Rivera. "We'll need to see your ID and boarding pass." I reached for my wallet, but Daniels stepped forward. "Allow me to help you with your belongings, sir." Before I could protest, he'd lifted my carry-on and placed it on a side table. Then he held out his hand. "Your wallet and phone as well, please, for safekeeping during the screening process." My stomach dropped. This wasn't standard procedure, not even close. But refusing would only escalate things. "I'd prefer to keep my personal items with me," I said carefully. Rivera's smile tightened. "That's not how this works, sir. We need to verify your identity, and we can't have you making calls or sending messages during the screening." The third officer, who hadn't spoken yet, moved slightly to block the door. The message was clear. Cooperation wasn't optional. I handed over my wallet and phone, watching as Daniels placed them in a plastic bin. "Thank you for your cooperation," he said, though his tone suggested I'd had no choice. "Now, we understand there was an incident on your flight today?" And there it was, the setup. This wasn't random at all. Someone had made a call, Ms. Harper, her colleague, perhaps even the passenger who'd filmed me. They were building a case against me before I could even defend myself. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," I said, choosing my words with extreme care. "I was assaulted by a flight attendant without provocation. There are witnesses." Rivera exchanged glances with Daniels. "That's not what we heard, sir. And there's video evidence suggesting otherwise." "That video has been edited," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "It doesn't show the full incident." "We'll be reviewing all available evidence," Daniels said dismissively. He flipped open my wallet, examining my driver's license with exaggerated scrutiny. "Mr. Alexander Reynolds. Interesting." The way he said my name made it clear. They knew exactly who I was. This wasn't just about the incident on the plane. This was about making sure I couldn't reach out to anyone before whatever they had planned next. Without my phone or ID, I was effectively cut off. The clock was ticking toward midnight, toward the finalization of my acquisition, and here I sat, powerless to stop the impending disaster. "How long do you plan to keep me here?" I asked, unable to completely mask the tension in my voice. "As long as necessary, Mr. Reynolds," Rivera replied with a thin smile. "As long as necessary." I sat in that windowless room for what felt like hours, though my watch told me only 45 minutes had passed. The metal chair grew increasingly uncomfortable beneath me, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with maddening persistence. The temperature seemed to drop with each passing minute, a deliberate tactic, I suspected. "Let's go over this again," Rivera said, her voice sharp with impatience. "You claim Ms. Harper struck you without provocation?" "Yes," I replied, keeping my voice steady and soft. "I was simply taking my assigned seat when she approached me and you made no aggressive movements toward her? Said nothing that could be interpreted as threatening?" Daniels cut in, looming over me. I shook my head. "Number, I was polite and followed all instructions." Rivera slapped a printed screenshot of the viral video on the table. "This doesn't look like the face of an innocent man, Mr. Reynolds." The image showed me with my hand raised, taken at the exact moment I'd reached up to touch my bleeding lip. Out of context, it looked damning. "That was after she hit me. I was checking my injury." I pointed to my still swollen lip. "Look, this is all a misunderstanding. If we could just—" "A misunderstanding," Daniels repeated with a humorless laugh. "You know how many times we hear that phrase in a day?" I forced myself to look contrite, even as rage bubbled inside me. Every instinct screamed to assert myself, to demand my rights, to call my lawyer. But that would only confirm their suspicions that I was exactly the entitled troublemaker they believed me to be. So instead, I played meek, compliant, just a confused passenger caught in an unfortunate situation. "I understand you're just doing your jobs," I said, lowering my eyes. "I want to cooperate." The third officer, who'd been silently observing from the corner, finally spoke. "Your ID seems to be missing from your wallet, Mr. Reynolds." My head snapped up. "What? That's impossible. It was right there when I handed it to you." He shrugged. "Not anymore. Makes our job more difficult." Cold dread washed over me. This wasn't incompetence, it was deliberate. They were building a case against me while simultaneously stripping me of the means to prove my identity. Without ID, I couldn't book another flight, couldn't rent a car, couldn't check into a hotel. I'd be stranded. And the clock kept ticking toward midnight. "Perhaps it slipped out when you took my wallet," I suggested, fighting to keep the accusation from my voice. "Could we check the floor? Or maybe it's in a different compartment?" Rivera sighed dramatically. "We'll look into it. In the meantime, we need to verify your identity through other means. You claim to be Alexander Reynolds, correct? What's your social security number?" The request raised red flags immediately. Airport security had no legitimate reason to ask for my social security number. This had gone beyond a simple incident report. They were fishing for information. "I'd prefer not to share that without understanding why you need it," I said carefully. Daniels leaned forward, his knuckles whitening as he pressed them against the table. "Are you refusing to cooperate, Mr. Reynolds?" Before I could answer, Rivera's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and muttered something to Daniels. He nodded. "We need to step out for a moment," Rivera announced. "Officer Chen will remain with you." They left, the door closing with a heavy click behind them. Officer Chen, the silent one, moved to stand by the door, arms crossed, expression unreadable. This might be my only chance. I needed to contact someone, anyone, who could help before things spiraled further out of control. But how? They had my phone. Or did they? I shifted in my chair, wincing theatrically. "Excuse me, Officer Chen? Would it be possible to use the restroom?" Chen's expression didn't change. "You'll need to wait until my colleagues return." "I understand, but it's rather urgent," I pressed, adding a note of embarrassment to my voice. The flight was over 4 hours, and they didn't let me go before bringing me here. A flicker of sympathy crossed his face. Human needs trumped protocol, even for the most dedicated officer. "Make it quick," he said, stepping aside from the door. "Bathroom's 2 doors down on the right. I'll escort you." As I stood, I casually patted my jacket pockets as if checking for tissues. My fingers brushed against the hard outline of my backup phone, the one they didn't know about. I'd started carrying it after a business trip where my primary phone had died at a crucial moment. It was small, basic, and right now, my only lifeline. Chen walked me to the bathroom door. 2 minutes, he warned. Once inside, I moved quickly. I locked the door, turned on the faucet to mask any sounds, and pulled out the slim phone from my inside jacket pocket. My hands trembled slightly as I powered it on. There was only one person I could trust with the full truth right now. One person who understood the airline's inner workings better than anyone else. One person who had warned me that my acquisition might face resistance from within. Eloise Denton. I typed rapidly, "Eloise. Airport security detention. Harper assaulted me. Video twisted. ID missing. Board will see soon. Midnight deadline. Help." I hit send, then quickly deleted the message from the phone's history. I flushed the toilet for show, washed my hands, and tucked the phone back into my hidden pocket. When I emerged, Chen was waiting exactly where I'd left him. He escorted me back to the interrogation room in silence, unaware that I'd just activated my only remaining lifeline. Now all I could do was wait and hope that Eloise would understand the gravity of my situation. The clock showed 7:43 p.m., just over 4 hours until midnight. I jumped slightly when my backup phone vibrated against my chest. With Officer Chen still watching me, I couldn't check it immediately. I shifted in my seat, trying to appear uncomfortable rather than anxious. "How much longer will this take?" I asked, letting a hint of irritation seep into my voice. Chen shrugged. "Not my call." His eyes remained fixed on me, calculating and cold. The minutes crawled by like ants across hot pavement. My palms grew damp as I fought the urge to reach for my phone. Finally, I heard footsteps approaching from down the hallway. The distinct click-clack of hard-soled shoes against linoleum. I coughed loudly, using the moment to slip my hand inside my jacket and press the phone's power button, silencing it completely. The last thing I needed was for it to buzz while Rivera and Daniels were in the room. The door swung open with a metallic groan, and Rivera entered alone, carrying a manila folder that looked worn at the edges. "Where's Officer Daniels?" I asked, scanning the doorway behind her. "He's following up on something," she replied vaguely, not meeting my eyes. "We'll continue without him." Her tone suggested I shouldn't ask further questions. As she shuffled through papers, spreading them across the table with practiced precision, I took the opportunity to slump forward slightly, as if exhausted by the whole ordeal. In that brief moment, I pulled out my phone and glanced at the screen, angling it away from Chen's watchful gaze. Eloise's response made my blood run cold, each word hammering into my consciousness. "You're being silenced, not random. Pattern targeting minorities in first class. COO Brent Hadley behind it. Boosting elite passenger experience by disappearing undesirables. Get proof now. They make people vanish. I'm working angles. Stay alert." I slipped the phone back into my pocket, my mind racing and heart pounding so loudly I feared Rivera might hear it. This wasn't just about me. This was systematic, calculated. And apparently, I wasn't the first victim, just the latest in a line of people deemed unwelcome in their precious first-class cabins. Brent Hadley. The name sparked immediate recognition, like a match struck in a dark room. The airline's chief operating officer, a man I'd researched extensively during my acquisition but never met in person. His reputation was mixed. Brilliant operational mind, but rumored to have questionable ethics. Now it seemed those rumors had severely understated the truth. The man wasn't just unethical. He was running what amounted to a corporate cleansing program. "Mr. Reynolds, are you feeling unwell?" Rivera asked, noticing my expression. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I forced myself to breathe normally to regain control of my features. "Just tired. It's been a long day." I rubbed my eyes for effect. "It's about to get longer," she replied, sliding a form across the table with a deliberate push of her fingertips. "We need you to sign this." I glanced at the document, careful not to betray my rising alarm as I scanned the small print. It was a statement acknowledging that I had been disruptive on the flight and assaulted a crew member. The legal implications were clear as day. Signing this would not only destroy my reputation but potentially expose me to criminal charges that could follow me for years. "I can't sign this," I said quietly, pushing it back toward her. "It's completely false." Rivera's expression hardened, her professional veneer cracking slightly to reveal something harder beneath. "We have multiple witnesses and video evidence that contradicts your version of events." "Then why do you need my signature?" I countered, meeting her gaze steadily. "It's standard procedure." The lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease. Bile rose in my throat as Eloise's message echoed in my mind. This wasn't standard procedure. This was part of Hadley's system for eliminating undesirables from their premium cabins. How many others had been coerced into signing similar statements? How many had their reputations destroyed, been banned from flying, or worse? The thought made my stomach clench. I needed proof, needed to document what was happening before I became another disappeared passenger. "I'd like to speak with an attorney before signing anything," I said, straightening my posture. Rivera's smile didn't reach her eyes, it was all teeth and no warmth. "That's your right, of course, but it will mean we'll need to hold you here much longer, possibly overnight." The threat hung in the air between us, past midnight, past my deadline. The takeover would collapse. "I understand," I replied, maintaining eye contact despite the panic fluttering in my chest. "I'm still not signing." She gathered the papers with deliberate slowness, each movement calculated to increase my anxiety. "I'll let my supervisor know your decision." As she stood to leave, I seized my chance. "Officer Rivera, may I use the restroom again?" The stress. I gestured vaguely toward my midsection. She hesitated, then nodded to Chen. "Escort him." Once again in the bathroom's relative privacy, I pulled out my phone and quickly typed a response to Eloise with trembling fingers. "They want me to sign false statement, refusing. Need to document this somehow. Any ideas?" Her reply came almost instantly, a lifeline in this nightmare. "Phone recording, state today's date, your name, location. Describe everything that's happened. Send file to me immediately. I'm contacting trustworthy board members." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and opened the voice recorder app. Speaking in a whisper close to the microphone, I documented everything. The unprovoked slap from Ms. Harper, the manipulated video, the confiscation of my ID, the coercion to sign a false statement. I mentioned Brent Hadley by name and the pattern Eloise had described, my voice gaining strength as I spoke. "This appears to be part of a systematic effort to remove minority passengers from premium cabins through harassment, intimidation, and false accusations," I whispered, my breath fogging the screen. "I believe my civil rights are being violated and I fear what may happen next." I ended the recording, attached it to an email to Eloise, and hit send. Just as the confirmation appeared, I heard a sharp knock on the door that made me flinch. "Time's up," Chen called, his voice muffled but impatient. I flushed the toilet for appearance's sake, washed my hands thoroughly to buy a few more seconds, and returned the phone to my hidden pocket. As Chen led me back toward the interrogation room, my mind was clearer despite the danger. I had evidence now, I had begun fighting back. The door to the interrogation room creaked open, but it wasn't Rivera waiting for me inside. A heavy-set man in an expensive suit that strained at the buttons stood by the table, his slicked-back hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights like an oil slick. I recognized him immediately from company photos, though they hadn't captured the cold calculation in his eyes. Brent Hadley, the COO himself. Brent Hadley's presence sent ice through my veins. The mastermind himself had decided to handle me personally. Not a good sign. He dismissed Chen with a casual flick of his wrist, and the door clicked shut behind us. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, his voice smooth as polished marble. "I apologize for this unfortunate situation." I remained silent, watching him carefully. This was the man orchestrating a systematic purge of people who looked like me from his premium cabins. The man who'd authorized Ms. Harper to assault me. "You know," he continued, settling into the chair across from me, We could resolve this quickly. A simple misunderstanding, blown out of proportion. He slid the same form toward me that Rivera had presented earlier. Sign this and you'll be on your way within minutes. I glanced at my watch. 5:52 p.m. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Less than 6 hours remained until my purchase agreement expired at 11:59 p.m. If I didn't finalize the acquisition by midnight, I'd lose my controlling stake in the airline, along with the substantial non-refundable deposit I'd already paid. Hadley noticed my glance. "Somewhere to be?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Just wondering how long this charade will continue," I replied, keeping my tone even. He leaned forward, dropping the friendly facade. "Listen carefully. You're nobody. You flew first class once and thought you belonged there. You don't. Sign the form, and this ends. Refuse, and I promise you'll regret it." My phone vibrated in my hidden pocket. Eloise, most likely. I needed to get out of here, and fast. "I need to use the restroom again," I said, and Hadley's eyes narrowed. "You just went..." "It's been a stressful day." He sighed dramatically and pressed a button on the wall. "Officer Chen will escort you." While we waited, a commotion erupted somewhere down the hall. Raised voices, something crashing to the floor. Hadley frowned and stood up. "Wait here," he ordered, then stepped out to investigate. The moment the door closed, I checked my phone. Eloise had texted, "Security footage from plane secured. Board members alarmed. Need Harper's confession to connect dots to Hadley. Time running out." She was right. A paper trail might exist somewhere, but nothing would be as damning as Harper's direct testimony linking her actions to Hadley's orders. I needed to find her, and fast. The commotion outside grew louder. Through the frosted glass window in the door, I could see shadows moving rapidly. Whatever was happening had drawn everyone's attention. This was my chance. I slipped to the door and eased it open an inch. The security office was in chaos. A belligerent passenger was shouting obscenities while 3 officers attempted to restrain him. Hadley stood at the edge of the scene, his back to me, barking orders. I took a deep breath and made my decision. In one fluid motion, I slipped out of the room and moved in the opposite direction of the disturbance, keeping my head down and my pace casual. No one called out. No one followed. At the first corner, I quickened my steps, navigating through the labyrinthine back corridors of the airport security area. Years of frequent travel had taught me the general layout of these spaces. I found an unmarked door that I guessed would lead to the main terminal and pushed through. I emerged near a busy food court, instantly blending into the crowd of travelers. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to walk naturally, not run. Running would draw attention. I needed to become invisible. As I moved through the terminal, I checked the time again. 6:07 p.m. The clock was ticking mercilessly. I had to find Harper, but where would she be? If she was still on duty, she might be preparing for the next flight. If her shift had ended, she could be anywhere. Employee lounge, heading home, or even giving her version of events to airline management. I pulled out my phone and called Eloise. "I'm out," I said when she answered, "but I need to find Harper. Can you track her location?" "Already on it," Eloise replied. "She's scheduled for flight 1852 to Chicago, boarding in 20 minutes at gate C-17. I've got people watching the security feeds. She's currently in the crew lounge near that gate." "I need to get to her before she boards that plane," I said, already changing direction toward Concourse C. "Be careful," Eloise warned. "Hadley will realize you're gone any minute. Security will be looking for you." She was right. I ducked into a shop and purchased a baseball cap and sunglasses, a basic disguise, but it might buy me precious minutes. As I approached Concourse C, I spotted 2 security officers scanning the crowd. They hadn't seen me yet, but they would if I continued in this direction. I diverted into a busy restaurant, walking straight through to the kitchen area as if I belonged there. The staff gave me startled looks, but before anyone could challenge me, I'd pushed through the back exit, which opened onto the service corridor running behind the concourse shops. These restricted corridors were my best chance of reaching Gate C-17 undetected. I moved quickly, passing confused airline staff who clearly wondered what I was doing there, but were too busy to stop me. At 6:22 p.m., I reached the junction that would lead to the crew lounge. The door required a security badge, which I didn't have. I waited around the corner, watching as crew members came and went. Finally, my patience paid off. Ms. Harper herself emerged from the lounge, her uniform pristine, her face composed as if she hadn't assaulted a passenger just hours earlier. She was alone. This was my moment. I had to get her confession before it was too late. I crouched low and watched Harper through the small rectangular window in the door. The staff lounge was dimly lit, with just a few scattered lamps casting pools of yellow light across worn furniture. Harper sat alone at a corner table, a glass of amber liquid in her hand. Her perfect flight attendant posture had collapsed. Her shoulders hunched forward as she stared at her drink. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out to see Eloise's name flashing on the screen. "I've got eyes on Harper," I whispered after accepting the call. "Listen carefully," Eloise said, her voice tense. "I've been making calls to my old contacts. This goes deeper than we thought. Hadley's been running this passenger harassment program for over a year. They've been targeting minorities and anyone who looks like they don't belong in first class." My stomach twisted. "So I wasn't the first." "Not by a long shot. But you're the first with the power to stop it." She paused. "Be careful with Harper. These people don't solve problems, they bury them. If she thinks you're a threat to her job or her freedom, there's no telling what she might do." I watched Harper take another long sip of her drink. "I need her confession. Without it, it's just my word against theirs." "I know, just be careful." The concern in Eloise's voice was palpable. They'd rather bury a problem than fix it. "I'll call you when I'm done," I said, ending the call and slipping the phone back into my pocket. I stood outside the door, hand hovering over the handle. My heart pounded in my chest. This confrontation could go a dozen different ways, and most of them ended badly for me. If I spooked Harper, she might call security. If I threatened her, she'd never cooperate. I needed to be calm, calculated, and in control. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed down my rumpled suit jacket and prepared to enter. Through the window, I could see Harper still sitting alone, now typing something on her phone with one hand while the other lifted her glass to her lips. Suddenly, she froze. Her glass slipped from her fingers, splashing liquid across the table. Her body gave a violent shudder. She clutched at her throat, eyes wide with panic. Something was very wrong. I shoved the door open and rushed inside. Harper's face had gone chalk white, her lips taking on a bluish tinge as she gasped for air. She toppled sideways off her chair, hitting the floor with a sickening thud. "Help!" I shouted, dropping to my knees beside her. "Somebody help!" Harper's eyes locked onto mine, recognition and terror battling across her features. Her body convulsed again, more violently this time. Foam appeared at the corners of her mouth. I rolled her onto her side, frantically trying to remember first aid procedures. Was she having an allergic reaction? A seizure? Had she been poisoned? "Stay with me," I urged, checking her pulse. It was racing erratically under my fingertips. "Help is coming." But even as I said it, I knew I was probably lying. The lounge was deserted at this hour, and the only sounds were Harper's desperate, wheezing breaths and my own panicked voice. Her hand suddenly shot out, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. She tried to speak, but only managed a strangled gurgle. Her eyes, though, they were desperate to communicate something. "What happened?" I asked. "Who did this to you?" Her fingers dug painfully into my skin as another spasm racked her body. When it passed, she used the last of her strength to pull me closer. "Hadley," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Knew too much." Her grip on my wrist slackened. Her eyes, still open, began to lose focus. No, I muttered, checking her pulse again. It was fading fast. "Stay with me, Harper." I fumbled for my phone, dialing emergency services with shaking fingers, but even as I reported the situation, I could see Harper's chest had stopped moving. Her eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. She was gone. I sat back on my heels, shock washing over me in cold waves. This wasn't just a racist incident anymore. This wasn't even just corporate corruption. This was murder. And I was alone in a room with the victim, a victim who everyone knew had assaulted me hours earlier. The realization hit me like a physical blow. If security found me here, with Harper dead at my feet after I'd escaped detention, the setup would be too perfect. I'd be arrested for murder before I could explain anything, yet I couldn't just leave her there. Whatever Harper had done, whatever role she'd played in Hadley's scheme, she didn't deserve to die like this. But she had. And her final word, Hadley, told me everything I needed to know. The COO wasn't just trying to stop me from taking control of the airline. He was eliminating witnesses. Harper knew too much, and now she was dead. And I was next on his list. I burst through the door of the staff lounge, my heart hammering against my ribs. The scene before me wasn't what I expected. Harper hadn't simply collapsed from drinking too much. She was sprawled on the floor, completely unconscious, her limbs twisted at unnatural angles. A syringe protruded from her forearm, its contents already emptied into her bloodstream. "Oh my God," I whispered, the words barely making it past my lips. My stomach lurched as the reality hit me. This wasn't a medical emergency. This was an attack, a deliberate silencing. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Someone had gotten to Harper before I could. I dropped to my knees beside her, checking for a pulse. It was there, but weak and erratic. Her breathing was shallow, her skin clammy. Whatever was in that syringe, it wasn't meant to kill her quickly. It was designed to look like an overdose or a medical episode. "Harper, can you hear me?" I tapped her face gently, then more firmly. No response. A cold realization washed over me. Hadley wasn't just trying to block my takeover or harass undesirable passengers. He was willing to eliminate people who knew too much. First Harper, and if I wasn't careful, I'd be next. The syringe caught my eye again. I couldn't leave it there. It was evidence. Using a napkin from the table, I carefully removed it from Harper's arm and wrapped it, tucking it into my inner jacket pocket. DNA, fingerprints, the substance itself. It might be the only proof of what had happened here. My gaze fell on Harper's phone, which had fallen a few feet away when she collapsed. I grabbed it, noticing it was still unlocked. Recent messages glowed on the screen, messages from a contact listed only as BH, Brent Hadley. The most recent read, Staff Lounge, 10 minutes, alone. And before that, we need to discuss your incident report. Major discrepancies. My blood ran cold. Hadley had lured her here, then either drugged her himself or had someone else do it. Either way, Harper was bait in a trap, and I'd walked right into it. As if confirming my fears, I heard shouting in the corridor outside. Heavy footsteps pounded toward the lounge. "Security, open up!" I pocketed Harper's phone and looked frantically around the room. The main door was no longer an option. My eyes landed on a service door in the back corner. Maintenance access, probably leading to the warren of staff corridors that honeycomb any major airport. I made a split-second decision. If security found me here with an unconscious flight attendant, the same one who'd assaulted me earlier, whose actions were now part of a viral video, I'd be finished. No explanation would save me. I'd be arrested, the purchase agreement would expire, and Hadley would win. I couldn't help Harper if I was in custody, and I couldn't expose Hadley's scheme from a jail cell. The pounding on the door grew more insistent. "Airport security, we're coming in." I darted to the maintenance door, yanking it open. It was dark beyond, but I could make out a narrow service corridor. Behind me, I heard the main door handle turning. With one last glance at Harper's unconscious form, I slipped through the maintenance door and pulled it shut behind me, just as security burst into the lounge. The service corridor was dimly lit by emergency lights spaced too far apart. I moved quickly, guided by the glow of Harper's phone screen. I had no idea where I was going, but away seemed like the best direction. My mind raced as I navigated the maze-like passages. The evidence was mounting, but still circumstantial. I had the syringe, but proving it came from Hadley would be nearly impossible. I had Harper's phone with incriminating messages, but those could be explained away as a normal manager-employee interaction. What I needed was Hadley himself, caught in the act or, better yet, confessing. A distant alarm began to wail. They'd found Harper, and now the hunt was on. I quickened my pace, taking turns at random, desperately hoping to find an exit that wouldn't lead me straight into security's arms. My own phone vibrated. Eloise. "Where are you?" Her message read, "Airport's on lockdown. They're saying you attacked Harper." The shock of reading those words nearly made me stumble. They were framing me already. Of course they were. I was the perfect scapegoat, the angry passenger who'd been aggressive earlier, now taking revenge. I typed back quickly, "Harper drugged. Syringe. Hadley behind it. Need extraction." Her response came seconds later. "Loading dock C. 10 minutes. Black SUV." I had a destination now, but no idea how to get there. I studied the service corridor, looking for any directional signs. There, a faded diagram on the wall showed the maintenance tunnel system. I traced possible routes with my finger, finding one that might lead toward the cargo area. The sounds of pursuit grew louder behind me. Radios crackling, boots on concrete. They were in the service corridors now, too. I pocketed both phones and ran, no longer caring about stealth. Time was running out, and not just for my escape. Harper was unconscious, possibly dying, while the man responsible was covering his tracks and framing me for his crimes. Loading dock C, black SUV, 10 minutes, and I just had to make it there alive and free. I slumped against the cold metal wall of the deserted hangar, my breath finally slowing. The loading dock escape had been closer than I'd have liked. Security had spotted the SUV just as I dove into the back seat. Eloise's driver had floored it, tires squealing as we escaped into the maze of airport service roads. "You need to get somewhere quiet," Eloise had instructed over the phone. "The old maintenance hangar on the east perimeter hasn't been used in months. You'll have time there." Now, as I sat in the cavernous space with only emergency lights casting long shadows across abandoned equipment, I pulled out Harper's phone. The screen was locked, of course. My tech background gave me a decent understanding of security protocols, but phone encryption wasn't something I could crack on my own. I texted Eloise, "Need access to Harper's phone, password protected." Her response came almost immediately, "Sending you something, 2 minutes." True to her word, my phone pinged with an incoming file. The message read, "Basic exploit program. Works on most corporate devices with standard security. IT insisted on upgrading all staff phones last year, but Hadley blocked it to save money. Their mistake." I smiled grimly. Hadley's cost-cutting might finally cost him everything. I installed the program and connected it to Harper's phone. The screen flickered, then displayed a progress bar. My heart pounded as I watched it inch forward. This was my one shot at finding concrete evidence before the purchase deadline expired. The bar completed and Harper's phone unlocked with a cheerful chime that echoed eerily in the empty hangar. What I found made my blood run cold. The text messages came first, hundreds of them between Harper and Hadley. I scrolled through them, my disgust growing with each exchange. "Another one in 3C today. Handled it like you taught us. Good work. Bonus in your next check. Keep it off the official reports. Customer in first class getting pushy about their rights. African-American male. How to proceed. You know the drill, make them look aggressive, camera angles matter." I felt sick. This wasn't just about me, this was systematic, a deliberate strategy to intimidate and remove passengers who didn't fit Hadley's vision of the airline's premium image. But the videos were worse, much worse. The first one showed Hadley himself, standing before a group of flight attendants in what looked like a training room. His sleeves were rolled up, his face animated as he demonstrated. "When you need to escalate, make sure you're positioned like this," he instructed, showing how to stand to block security cameras. "Remember, we need plausible deniability. The passenger becomes aggressive, you respond appropriately, and our premium customers feel safer." I watched in horror as he role-played scenarios with the staff. How to provoke without seeming to. How to make physical contact that would trigger defensive reactions. How to ensure any recordings would show only the passenger's response, never the provocation. Another video showed Hadley instructing security personnel on special handling procedures for problematic elements. "The goal is simple," he said in the recording. "Make the experience so unpleasant they never fly with us again, and make sure their complaints go nowhere." I kept digging, finding folders organized by date. Some contained what appeared to be trophies, recordings of successful removals, as Hadley called them, passengers being escorted off planes, detained in security rooms, or handcuffed in terminals. All of them had one thing in common. They didn't fit Hadley's idea of premium clientele. There were financial records too, bonuses paid to staff who successfully carried out these operations, settlements with passengers who had enough evidence to threaten lawsuits, all buried under vague accounting codes. And then I found it, a folder labeled Special Handling Protocols. Inside was a document that made everything clear. Increasing premium cabin revenue through demographic management. It was a full strategic plan, complete with targets, metrics, and ROI calculations. Hadley had turned racism into a business model, systematically driving away passengers who didn't fit his preferred demographic to create what he called a premium atmosphere that would justify higher fares. My hands shook with rage as I scrolled through the document. This wasn't just about discrimination, it was fraud, assault, false imprisonment, and who knew what other crimes, all committed to artificially inflate the airline's premium cabin profits. I checked the timestamp on the most recent communication, 4:37 p.m. today, right after the incident with me. Hadley had texted Harper, "This one's trouble. Tech guy, recording everything. Meet me after your shift. We'll handle personally." And then the final message that had lured her to the staff lounge. I quickly backed up everything to my secure cloud storage, then sent the most damning files directly to Eloise with a message. Evidence of criminal conspiracy. Hadley targeting passengers based on race, instructing staff to provoke and remove them, documenting everything. Her response was immediate. "This is worse than I thought. Not just unethical, criminal. The board needs to see this before midnight." I checked the time, 9:23 p.m., just over 2.5 hours until the purchase agreement expired. "What's our next move?" I texted back. "Stay put," she replied. "I'm bringing someone to you. Board member who needs to see this firsthand, and someone else who can help make sure Hadley doesn't escape consequences." I sat back against the wall, Harper's phone clutched in my hand. The evidence was overwhelming. Hadley had built an entire shadow operation within the airline, systematically abusing passengers to manipulate profits and stock prices, and I had him dead to rights. My phone buzzed with another message from Eloise. "Airport Marriott, room 1742. Come now. Use service entrance." I pocketed Harper's phone and peered out from the hangar. The airport was crawling with security. Hadley's people, no doubt. Getting to the hotel wouldn't be easy, but I had no choice. I slipped out through a maintenance door and kept to the shadows, moving between service vehicles and luggage carts. My heart pounded against my ribs as I dodged security cameras and personnel. Every face looked like a potential threat. 20 nerve-wracking minutes later, I reached the hotel's service entrance. A kitchen worker was propping the door open for a smoke break. I straightened my jacket, adopted a confident stride, and walked right past him with a casual nod. He barely looked up. Inside, I took the service elevator to the 17th floor, then climbed one flight of stairs to avoid the hallway cameras. Room 1742 was at the end of a long corridor. I knocked softly. 3 quick taps. The door opened immediately. Eloise stood there, her silver hair immaculate despite the crisis, wearing a tailored navy suit that radiated authority. The relief on her face when she saw me was palpable. "Thank God," she said, pulling me inside. "I thought they might have caught you." The room was a standard hotel suite, but Eloise had transformed it into a command center. Laptops were open on every surface, files spread across the bed, and a whiteboard had been wheeled in from some conference room. "We don't have much time," she said, checking her watch. "The board's emergency meeting starts in 30 minutes. "Emergency meeting?" I asked. "Hadley called it. He's planning to convince them to reject your purchase agreement before midnight." She gestured to one of the laptops. He's compiled a dossier painting you as unstable and financially unreliable, claims you assaulted a flight attendant and are now making wild accusations to cover your tracks. My stomach clenched. He works fast. He's been planning this for weeks, Eloise said grimly. The moment he learned someone was buying controlling shares, he started laying groundwork to discredit you if needed. Today was just the execution. I pulled out Harper's phone, but he didn't count on this. Eloise's eyes gleamed. Show me everything. For the next 15 minutes, I walked her through the evidence, the videos, the messages, the strategic documents. With each revelation, her expression hardened. This is worse than I imagined, she said finally. It's not just discrimination, it's systematic fraud. He's been manipulating passenger demographics to artificially inflate premium cabin pricing and boost his performance bonuses. So what's our plan? I asked, feeling the pressure of the clock. It was 9:37 p.m., less than 2.5 hours until midnight. Eloise moved to the whiteboard, marker in hand. We crash the board meeting. Show them exactly what Hadley's been doing in their name. Force them to vote on your purchase agreement tonight, before it expires. Just walk in? I asked skeptically. Security will stop us. Not if we have this. She held up a board member's access badge. Margaret Chen, the only board member I still trust. She's waiting downstairs. Wanted to review the evidence before putting her neck on the line. And the others? Will they listen? Eloise's expression was grim but determined. They'll have no choice. This isn't just about your purchase anymore. This is criminal liability. If they don't act tonight, they become complicit. She drew a quick diagram on the whiteboard, the boardroom layout with names at each position. Hadley will be here, she said, marking an X. He'll try to control the narrative from the start. We need to get in, take command of the room, and show the evidence before he can shut us down. The weight of what we were attempting pressed down on me. If we failed, I'd lose not just the airline, but potentially my entire tech company. Everything I'd built over years of backbreaking work would collapse. And Hadley would make sure I went down as the villain. What if they don't believe us? I asked quietly. Eloise put a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was firm, reassuring. That's why we bring the proof. That's why we have Margaret. That's why we don't give them time to think. Just time to act. She checked her watch again. We need to move. The meeting starts at 10 p.m. sharp. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of terror and resolve. Let's do this. Eloise smiled, a fierce, determined smile that reminded me why she'd been such a legendary executive. One more thing, she said, handing me a flash drive. Backup of everything. Keep it on you at all times. As we gathered our evidence and prepared to leave, I felt the crushing weight of potential failure looming over me. Everything I'd worked for was balanced on the knife's edge of the next 2 hours. If we failed, Hadley won. If we succeeded... I looked at Eloise, this formidable woman who'd taken my side against her former colleagues, who was risking her reputation to help me expose the truth. With her at my side, that flicker of hope I'd been nursing burst into something stronger. We had the truth, we had the evidence, and now we had a plan. Ready? Eloise asked, hand on the door. I nodded. Ready. The city lights glittered like fallen stars beneath us as Eloise and I crossed the darkened parking lot toward the airline's corporate headquarters. A massive glass tower, it knifed into the night sky, its top floors still illuminated despite the late hour. That's where the board would be meeting. That's where our showdown with Hadley would happen. Remember, Eloise whispered, we have exactly 18 minutes before the meeting officially begins. Hadley always arrives 15 minutes early to set up. My heart hammered against my ribs. And the security system? I've got that covered. She patted her tablet. Margaret gave me her login credentials. I can loop the security feeds on the service floors for exactly 4 minutes. That's your window to get to the service elevator. We approached the building from the loading dock side, staying in the shadows. The weight of Harper's phone felt heavy in my pocket, like I was carrying a bomb rather than evidence. There. Eloise pointed to a service entrance partially hidden behind a dumpster. That's your way in. I'll meet you upstairs. I'm using Margaret's badge at the front. You're sure this will work? I asked, doubt creeping into my voice. She gave me a look that could have melted steel. Number. But it's the only play we have. With that, she disappeared around the corner, leaving me alone with my thundering pulse and sweating palms. I checked my watch. 9:48 p.m. The digital seconds ticked away, each one bringing me closer to either salvation or ruin. At exactly 9:50 p.m., my phone vibrated with Eloise's text. Cameras looped, go now. I sprinted to the service door, swiping the keycard she'd programmed. The light flashed green, and I slipped inside, finding myself in a dimly lit corridor that smelled of industrial cleaner and old coffee. Every sound, my footsteps, my breathing, the distant hum of the building's systems, seemed magnified 100-fold. I moved quickly but cautiously, following the path Eloise had memorized from the building plans. Left at the first junction, then right past the maintenance room. The service elevator waited at the end of the hall, its brushed metal doors reflecting my tense face back at me. Another text, 2 minutes left on loop. I jabbed the call button repeatedly, sweat beading on my forehead. The elevator seemed to take an eternity, each second stretching into painful awareness of how exposed I was. Finally, the doors slid open with a soft chime that sounded like an air raid siren to my frayed nerves. I stepped inside, hit the button for the 52nd floor, and watched the doors close just as my phone buzzed again. Cameras back online, you clear? I typed back a quick in elevator and leaned against the wall, trying to control my breathing. The elevator hummed as it climbed, floor numbers ticking upward with agonizing slowness. 2025. Mupada. At floor 38, the elevator suddenly jerked to a stop. My heart leapt into my throat as the car shuddered. Was this Hadley? Had security spotted me? I frantically texted Eloise. Elevator stopped 38. The doors slid open to reveal a janitor with a cleaning cart. He looked as startled to see me as I was to see him. Evening, I managed, trying to look like I belonged. He nodded uncertainly, then backed away. I'll catch the next one. The doors closed, and I sagged against the wall in relief as the elevator resumed its climb. Narpa the 45, Aimbada. At 52, I peeked out cautiously. The executive floor was all soft lighting, plush carpet, and expensive art. And completely deserted, thank God. I moved swiftly down the corridor, following the signs to the boardroom. My phone buzzed. In position. East entrance. Margaret with me. I could see the boardroom now. A glass-walled space at the end of the hall with a panoramic view of the city. Inside, a massive table surrounded by empty chairs waited like the setting for a Last Supper. I ducked into an alcove as voices approached from an adjoining corridor. Absolutely unprecedented quarter, a man's voice was saying. Hadley. Once we handle this little ownership hiccup, we'll be positioned for... I pressed myself deeper into the shadows as Hadley and two board members I recognized from my research passed by. They entered the boardroom, completely unaware of my presence. 9:55 p.m., 5 minutes until the official start. I texted Eloise, Hadley inside with two others moving to position. Her reply came instantly. Wait for my signal. Don't go in alone. I crept closer to the boardroom, staying low beneath the windows. Through the glass, I could see Hadley arranging papers at the head of the table, speaking animatedly to the others. More board members arrived, each greeted with handshakes and false smiles. 9:58 p.m. My palms were slick with sweat, my mouth dry as dust. Then I saw Eloise at the far end of the corridor, Margaret Chen beside her. They walked purposefully toward the boardroom, looking every inch like they belonged there. Margaret nodded almost imperceptibly in my direction. My phone lit up with Eloise's final message, now. I stepped out from my hiding place, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the boardroom door. Every step felt like walking through molasses, every sound amplified in my ears. The handle of the door was cool against my palm as I pushed it open. Conversation inside died instantly. 8 pairs of eyes turned toward me, expressions ranging from confusion to shock to, in Hadley's case, barely concealed rage. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, rising from his seat. "How did you get in here?" Before I could answer, the other door opened and Eloise strode in with Margaret. The room erupted in confused murmurs. "Eloise? Margaret? What's going on?" asked an older man at the far end of the table. I stepped forward, heart pounding but voice steady. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my name is—" "This man is trespassing," Hadley cut in sharply. "Security is on their way." "Actually," I said, pulling out Harper's phone, "I'm here to show you something that can't wait until morning." I held Harper's phone up like it was both a shield and a weapon. The stunned silence in the boardroom gave me just enough time to connect it to the projection system built into the sleek conference table. My fingers trembled slightly, but my mind was clear. This was it. The moment everything hinged on. "What you're about to see," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "is evidence of a systematic campaign of harassment, discrimination, and criminal activity orchestrated by your COO, Brent Hadley." Hadley lunged forward. "This is preposterous. Security will be here any—" "Let him speak," interrupted Margaret Shen, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. As one of the most respected board members, her authority was instant. "I want to hear this." I hit play on the first video. The boardroom screen flickered to life, showing Hadley in what looked like a training room with several flight attendants, Harper among them. "Remember," Hadley's recorded voice instructed, "we need these seats for people who actually belong there. If someone doesn't look the part, they probably got the ticket through some mistake or promotion. Make them uncomfortable, create a scene if necessary." Gasps rippled through the room. An older board member with silver hair removed his glasses, mouth hanging open. That's taken completely out of context," Hadley sputtered, his face flushing crimson. I swiped to the next video without responding. This one showed Hadley speaking directly to Harper. "The passenger in 2A tomorrow doesn't fit our customer profile. Make sure he doesn't have a pleasant flight. If he complains, we'll say he was being disruptive." The passenger he was describing was me. "My God," whispered someone at the far end of the table. "There's more," I said grimly, queuing up a series of text messages between Hadley and various crew members. "Need to clear 3 seats in first class for VIPs. Use standard procedure on the passengers in 4B, 7A, and 9C. Security handled that situation in Chicago. Passenger won't be flying with any airline again. Plant it in his bag during security screening if you have to. Just get him off the flight." With each revelation, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Board members exchanged horrified glances. One woman covered her mouth with her hand. Even Eloise, who had seen some of this before, looked sick. "This is a complete fabrication," Hadley shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "This man assaulted our staff today. He's trying to sabotage—" I was slapped across the face by Harper for sitting in my assigned first-class seat, I cut in, my voice rising. "And I have the real video to prove it, not the edited version your people circulated." I played the unaltered footage from the plane, captured by another passenger from a different angle than the viral video. The sound of Harper's hand connecting with my face echoed through the boardroom's premium speakers. "Jesus Christ," muttered the silver-haired board member. My calm facade was cracking now, rage seeping through as I continued. "This isn't just about me. This is about hundreds of passengers who've been harassed, humiliated, detained, and even drugged, like Harper was tonight, to cover up this systematic discrimination." I slammed my hand on the table, making several board members jump. "You've had a policy of removing passengers based on race, appearance, or perceived social status to free up premium seats for last-minute sales to preferred customers. You've planted contraband on innocent travelers. You've falsified security reports. You've created a culture where assault is an acceptable way to handle customers who don't look right." My voice was shaking the very air now, years of contained fury finally finding release. "And when it all threatened to come crashing down, you were willing to drug your own employee to silence her." Hadley's face had gone from red to ashen. "You can't prove any of this is authentic," he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. I pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table to Margaret. Everything is here. Timestamps, metadata, GPS locations, over 200 incidents, names, dates, flight numbers, text messages, videos, financial records showing the profit from these cleared seats, and testimony from 4 crew members who are prepared to come forward. The boardroom erupted. Several members started shouting at once. Is this true? How long has this been happening? The liability exposure alone. We could be facing criminal charges. I stood tall, looking directly at Hadley, whose eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal. You built a system designed to humiliate people like me, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. People who didn't fit your image of who belongs in first class, and you did it for profit, extra revenue from last-minute premium sales to your preferred customers. The chairman of the board, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Mr. Hadley, do you have anything to say in your defense? Hadley's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. This can't. You don't understand the pressure we've been under to maximize revenue. So you're not denying it? Asked another board member incredulously. The look on Hadley's face told everyone everything they needed to know. I saw the change in Hadley's eyes before anyone else did. That feral shift when a cornered animal decides to attack. His hand twitched toward his jacket pocket, and I tensed. You, he snarled, spittle flying from his lips. You think you can just walk in here and… He lunged across the table toward me, knocking over water glasses and sending tablets clattering to the floor. I braced myself for impact, but it never came. The boardroom doors burst open with a thunderous crash. Federal agents, everybody down! A flood of dark-suited figures poured into the room, weapons drawn. The board members froze in shock, hands instinctively raising. Hadley, caught mid-lunge, was tackled to the polished mahogany table by 2 agents who materialized on either side of him. Brent Hadley, announced a stern-faced woman in a dark suit, flashing a badge. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, assault, false imprisonment, and violation of civil rights under color of authority. The agents roughly yanked Hadley's arms behind his back. The metallic click of handcuffs closing around his wrists echoed in the stunned silence of the boardroom. What the hell is happening? Demanded the chairman, finding his voice. Department of Justice, the lead agent replied crisply. We've been investigating Mr. Hadley and several accomplices for 6 months. Interstate transportation fraud falls under federal jurisdiction. My eyes met Eloise's across the room. Her slight nod confirmed what I'd suspected. She'd been working with the feds all along. No wonder she knew so much about the operation. Hadley's face contorted with rage as they hauled him upright. This is a setup, he screamed, struggling against the restraints. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have connections that will… Save it for your lawyer, one agent cut him off unmoved. As they dragged him toward the door, Hadley locked eyes with me. The hatred burning there made my skin crawl. You, he hissed. This isn't over. You think you've won? Harper was just following orders. My orders. She'll tell them everything was my idea. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Harper. Her role in all this remained murky at best. Was she a willing participant in this discrimination scheme, or just another pawn in Hadley's game? And more importantly, who had drugged her and why? The agents marched Hadley out, his threats still echoing in the hallway. The board members sat in stunned silence, trying to process the whirlwind that had just torn through their orderly world. I glanced at my watch. 10:47 p.m. Just over an hour until midnight, until the purchase agreement expired. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, drawing their attention back to me. We still have business to conclude. The chairman shook his head, dazed. After what just happened, the airline is facing a catastrophic scandal, criminal charges, class action lawsuits. Our stock will plummet by morning. Which is precisely why we need to finalize this transaction tonight, I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. The purchase agreement I signed provides stability during this crisis. Without it, the airline might not survive what's coming. Margaret, the board's legal counsel, nodded slowly. He's right. The terms of the acquisition include provisions for legal liabilities predating the change in ownership. The new majority owner assumes those risks, with appropriate adjustments to the purchase price, of course. New majority owner? Echoed one of the board members, looking confused. What are you talking about? I straightened my tie and took a deep breath. The moment had come to reveal what I'd been hiding all day. My name is Alexander Mercer. 3 months ago, I began purchasing shares in this airline through various holding companies. As of last week, I own 49% of outstanding shares, pending final approval of the purchase agreement that expires at midnight tonight. The revelation landed like a bomb. Faces around the table registered shock, confusion, and dawning comprehension. You're the buyer? The chairman stammered. But why all the secrecy? Why put yourself through all of this? I felt the weight of the day pressing down on my shoulders. The slap, the humiliation, the detention, the chase, Harper's unconscious body, the federal agents. It all swirled together in a dizzying kaleidoscope. I didn't plan for any of this to happen, I admitted. I was conducting a final anonymous inspection of my investment. I wanted to experience the airline as a regular passenger before the deal closed. I never expected to uncover a criminal conspiracy. The chairman looked at his watch. We have just under an hour to review and approve the final documents. The paperwork is ready, I said. It's been ready for weeks. All it needs are your signatures. As the board members exchanged glances, I could see the calculations happening behind their eyes. They needed this deal more than ever now. With Hadley's arrest and the coming scandal, the airline's value would plummet unless they had a stable ownership structure in place. There's still the matter of Ms. Harper, said Margaret, the legal counsel. If she was acting under orders. I nodded grimly. That's something we'll need to address. But right now, we need to focus on saving this airline, one crisis at a time. The chairman sighed heavily. Let's see those documents. The board members were still reviewing the documents when a commotion erupted in the hallway outside. I turned toward the sound just as the boardroom door burst open again. 2 more federal agents entered, flanking a disheveled Harper. Her uniform was rumpled, her eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. My heart hammered against my ribs. The last time I'd seen her, she'd been unconscious with a syringe in her arm. Now here she was, handcuffed and being led into the same boardroom where her boss had just been arrested. Ms. Amanda Harper? One of the agents announced formally, though it was clearly rhetorical. You're under arrest for conspiracy, assault, falsification of evidence, and violation of civil rights statutes. Harper's gaze locked onto mine, and I saw recognition flash across her face, followed by pure, undiluted hatred. Her lips curled into a snarl. You, she spat. I knew you were trouble the moment you stepped on my plane. Your plane? I repeated quietly. The irony wasn't lost on me. The chairman cleared his throat. Agents, we're in the middle of an important meeting. Is this really necessary? We apologize for the interruption, the female agent replied professionally. But we thought you should know that Ms. Harper has been providing evidence against Mr. Hadley and several other executives. We've been building this case for months. I blinked in surprise. Months? Then why did I slap you? Harper finished my question, her voice bitter. Because I'm a fool who believed Hadley when he said one more incident would finally get me the promotion I'd been promised for years. She laughed, a hollow sound. I was recording everything for the feds, but Hadley kept dangling carrots. Just one more passenger who doesn't belong in first class. My stomach twisted. The casual cruelty of it all hit me like a physical blow. So you chose me. You fit the profile Hadley wanted, she admitted, not meeting my eyes. Young, minority, successful looking, the perfect target to make an example of. One of the board members pulled out his phone, his face going pale. It's everywhere, he muttered. The video of the assault. It's gone viral. Others around the table began checking their devices. I pulled out my own phone and saw notifications flooding in. Someone had released the unedited footage of Harper slapping me, along with other videos from Harper's phone showing her involvement in the scheme. "We didn't release those," the male agent said quickly, looking concerned. "That evidence is part of an ongoing investigation." I knew immediately who had. Eloise. She'd been working behind the scenes this whole time, making sure justice wouldn't be buried in legal maneuvering. Harper seemed to shrink before my eyes as she realized what was happening. "My career is over," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "It was over the moment you decided to assault a passenger," I said quietly. "But you could have stopped there. Instead, you doubled down. You threatened me. You helped detain me illegally. You were willing to destroy someone's life to advance your own." The comments on the viral videos were brutal. People were calling for Harper's firing, for lawsuits, for criminal charges. The court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict, and it was merciless. As I watched her face crumple, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Satisfaction? Yes. She'd tried to humiliate me, and now she was facing the consequences. But there was also a deep, aching sadness. How many other passengers had suffered similar treatment without the resources or position to fight back? How many battles had been fought unseen, with no justice at the end? "Take her away," the chairman said, unable to look at Harper. "We have a company to save." The agents nodded and began leading Harper toward the door. As they passed me, she paused. "For what it's worth," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. Not just for hitting you, but for all of it." I didn't respond. What could I say? Her apology couldn't erase what had happened, and it certainly couldn't erase the systematic discrimination Hadley had fostered throughout the airline. As the door closed behind her, I turned back to the board. Where were we? "The purchase agreement," Margaret reminded me, sliding the papers across the table. "If you're still interested in owning an airline with this much baggage." I looked around at their faces, worried, hopeful, calculating. They weren't innocent in all this. They'd allowed Hadley's practices to continue, either through neglect or willful ignorance. "I am," I said firmly, "but there will be changes, significant ones." The chairman nodded, relief visible on his face. "Of course. Whatever you think is necessary." My phone buzzed with a text from Eloise. Footage released. Harper trending #1. Board meeting going well. I typed back quickly, almost done. Harper just arrested in front of board. Her response came immediately. "Justice served. Now finish the deal." I glanced at my watch. 11:22 p.m. 38 minutes to midnight. 38 minutes to transform from victim to owner. 38 minutes to ensure this never happened to anyone else on my airline. The board members shuffled papers and exchanged nervous glances as I reviewed the final ownership documents. My lawyer had sent them to my phone, a contingency we'd planned for, though neither of us had imagined I'd be signing them in a room full of stunned executives after exposing a criminal conspiracy. "Everything appears to be in order," I said, scrolling through the digital contract. Margaret, the board secretary, leaned forward. "We've made the amendments you requested regarding the executive restructuring." I nodded, skimming the section that outlined the immediate removal of several key figures aligned with Hadley. My finger hovered over the signature line as I checked my watch. 11:57 p.m. 3 minutes to midnight. 3 minutes until the purchase agreement would expire, and I'd lose everything I'd fought for. "Is there a problem?" the chairman asked, sweat beading on his forehead. "Just being thorough," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. The room was dead silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Every person around that massive oak table was holding their breath. For them, this was about saving the airline from scandal. For me, it was about something far more personal. I thought about how this day had started, boarding a flight, excited about my secret acquisition, only to be slapped across the face for not knowing my place. I remembered the blood on my lip, the humiliation burning through me as other passengers stared. I remembered being detained, having my ID stolen, being treated like a criminal. And now, here I was, about to own the entire airline. 11:58 p.m. I scrolled to the final page and positioned my finger over the electronic signature box. The DocuSign interface prompted me to draw my signature. With careful precision, I traced my name on the screen. 11:59 p.m. I hit sign and watched as the system processed my signature. A loading circle appeared, spinning lazily as seconds ticked by. My heart hammered against my ribs. What if the system crashed? What if the internet connection failed? What if... The screen changed. Signing complete, it announced. All parties have signed. Processing document ... I glanced at my watch again. 11:59:47 p.m. 13 seconds to spare. The chairman's phone pinged, followed by several others around the table as the system notified all parties that the agreement had been executed. Relief washed over their faces. My own phone buzzed a moment later. The notification read, "Congratulations. Ownership transfer complete. Transaction ID 78954-AXTR-1102. Just like that, I was the majority owner of a major international airline. For a brief, dizzying moment, I let myself feel the enormity of what had just happened. The culmination of years of work, months of negotiations, and one hellish day that had nearly destroyed everything. A warm surge of triumph spread through my chest, and I closed my eyes to savor it. But only for a moment. This wasn't just a business win. It wasn't even primarily about money or power. It was about survival, proving that I wouldn't be erased, wouldn't be silenced, wouldn't be pushed aside because someone decided I didn't belong. I opened my eyes and pocketed my phone. "The transaction is complete," I announced to the room. "Effective immediately, I am the majority owner of this airline." The board members nodded, some offering tentative congratulations. They didn't understand yet what this meant, how completely things were about to change. "I'll need access to all systems and records first thing tomorrow morning," I continued. "My team will be conducting a thorough audit of every department, with special attention to customer service protocols and security procedures." "Of course," the chairman said quickly. "Whatever you need." "I'm also implementing a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind," I added. "Every employee, from flight attendants to executives, will undergo mandatory training. Anyone found engaging in discriminatory behavior will be terminated immediately." Margaret made notes furiously as I spoke. The other board members exchanged glances, but no one objected. "And one more thing," I said, my voice hardening slightly. "I want a complete list of every passenger who filed a complaint about discriminatory treatment in the last 5 years. Each one will receive a personal apology from me, along with compensation for their experience." "That could be quite costly," one of the older board members ventured cautiously. I fixed him with a steady gaze. "So is racism, so is assault, so is false imprisonment. The cost of making this right is nothing compared to the cost these passengers have already paid." He shrank back in his chair, properly chastened. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. "It's been a long day and we all have work to do tomorrow. This meeting is adjourned." As they gathered their things, my phone buzzed with a text from Eloise. "Done?" I typed back quickly, "Done. We own an airline." Her response came immediately. "Never doubted you for a second. Congratulations, boss." I smiled faintly at her message, but the victory felt strangely hollow. Yes, I'd won. Yes, I'd survived. But the day's events had shown me just how deep the rot went, not just in this airline, but everywhere. One signature couldn't fix that. What it could do, though, was give me the power to start making changes, real ones. And that, I decided as I walked out of the boardroom, was worth far more than revenge. I woke to my phone buzzing itself nearly off the nightstand. For a moment, I just stared at it, my mind struggling to process the barrage of notifications lighting up the screen. After yesterday's nightmare, I'd crashed in a hotel room Eloise had arranged, falling into a dreamless sleep the moment my head hit the pillow. My body had simply shut down, desperate to process everything that had happened. Now, squinting at the bright screen, I saw what had everyone so worked up. The headline from the Wall Street Journal blazed across my notifications. "Black owner brings down corrupt airline empire." CNN followed with tech entrepreneur uncovers systemic discrimination at major airline. Even the local papers had picked it up. New airline owner exposes criminal conspiracy in dramatic boardroom showdown. I sat up, suddenly wide awake, my heart pounding against my ribs. The story had broken. All of it. Every dirty detail I'd fought so hard to uncover was now splashed across the national news. My phone rang. Eloise. "Good morning, Mr. Airline Magnate," she said when I answered, her voice carrying that rare note of triumph I'd come to recognize. "Have you seen the news?" "Just waking up to it," I replied, my voice still rough with sleep, running a hand over my face. "How bad is it?" "Bad? It's fantastic. You're trending everywhere. The video of you walking into that boardroom with the evidence is already at 2 million views." I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Decades of corporate battles finally culminating in this moment. I frowned, my foggy brain catching on one detail. "Video? What video?" "Oh." Eloise paused, and I could practically see her innocent expression. "I may have had the building's security cameras record your big moment. For posterity. And, evidence." Despite everything, I laughed. A genuine release of tension that felt foreign after weeks of stress. "Of course you did." "You should get dressed," she continued, all business again. "Cars waiting downstairs to take you to your new office. The board's expecting you at 9. I glanced at the clock, 7:30 a.m. "I'll be ready." 90 minutes later, I walked through the gleaming glass doors of the airline's headquarters. The security guard who'd barely acknowledged me during previous visits now scrambled to his feet, nearly knocking over his coffee. "Good morning, sir." "ID, please." He stopped mid-sentence, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Oh, you're just doing your job," I said, offering my ID anyway, feeling a strange mix of awkwardness and satisfaction. "I appreciate that." He checked it with shaking hands, then handed it back with a nod. "Have a good day, sir." The "sir" hung in the air between us, the same man who'd once made me wait 20 minutes while he verified my appointment. The elevator ride to the executive floor was surreal. 2 junior executives who got on with me kept stealing glances, then staring at their phones. I could practically see them scrolling through news articles, connecting the dots between the man in the headlines and the one standing next to them. The silence in that small space was deafening. When the doors opened on the top floor, Eloise was waiting, elegant as always in a charcoal suit that somehow communicated both authority and celebration. "Your new kingdom," she said with a small smile, falling into step beside me. "The board's assembled in the conference room, and..." She lowered her voice, leaning closer. "The FBI is here too. They want to talk about the evidence we found." I nodded, straightening my tie, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. Let's not keep them waiting. The conference room fell silent when I entered. The same board members who'd watched in shock as I exposed their COO last night now stood respectfully. Some looked ashamed, others calculating, a few genuinely relieved. At the far end of the table, 2 agents in dark suits observed the scene with professional detachment. "Good morning," I said, taking my place at the head of the table, the chair that had belonged to the previous CEO, who was conspicuously absent. The leather felt cool against my back. "Please sit." As everyone settled, I noticed a stack of newspapers on the table. Each one carried some variation of the same headline, my face staring back at me from glossy photos. It was jarring, seeing myself like that, the story of my life reduced to bold print and dramatic phrases. "I assume you've all seen the news," I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. "This isn't how I planned to announce my ownership of this airline." A few nervous chuckles rippled around the table, but perhaps it's fitting, because transparency is going to be at the core of everything we do moving forward. I looked each board member in the eye, one by one, letting the moment stretch. What happened yesterday, what's been happening at this airline for years, ends now. The meeting lasted 3 hours. The FBI agents detailed the charges against Hadley and his accomplices, their monotone delivery making the crime sound even more disturbing. The board presented preliminary reports on the scope of the discrimination scheme, numbers and statistics that represented real people whose careers had been destroyed. Eloise outlined our immediate response plan, her decades of experience evident in every precisely chosen word. Through it all, I felt strangely detached, as if watching myself from a distance. This was my victory, my vindication, yet the cost of it weighed heavily. The humiliation I'd endured, the betrayal by people entrusted with customers' safety, the violence, both what I'd experienced personally and what others had suffered before me. I carried all of it into this corner office, this leather chair, this position of power. But I carried hope too. Hope that I could transform this airline into something better. Hope that my story might prevent others from facing the same treatment. Hope that by standing my ground, I'd made it a little harder for the next person to be erased. When the meeting finally ended and everyone filed out, I remained seated, staring at the headlines spread across the table. My phone buzzed with another notification, a message from my mother. "So proud of you, son. You showed them." I smiled faintly, running my finger across the bold print of the headline. Black owner brings down corrupt airline empire. Not exactly how I'd planned to announce my acquisition, but maybe, just maybe, it was the announcement this company needed. I woke before my alarm, a habit I'd never been able to shake. The digital clock on my nightstand read 5:17 a.m., early enough to catch the first flights of the day. My new apartment still felt strange, boxes half unpacked in corners, furniture arranged temporarily until I had time to make it feel like home. But the view was why I'd chosen this place. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced east, overlooking the airport. From here, I could watch every takeoff, every landing. I padded to the kitchen in bare feet, the hardwood cool against my soles. The coffee maker was one of the few things I'd properly set up. Some priorities never change. From the cabinet, I pulled out my mother's old mug, chipped at the rim, the blue glaze faded from decades of use. It wasn't fancy or impressive. Nothing like the sleek, modern things that filled the rest of my life now. But it was hers. She'd sipped from it every morning while telling me I could be anything, do anything if I worked hard enough. She hadn't lived to see me prove her right. Cancer took her 3 years before I made my first million, 5 before I built my tech company into something that could purchase an airline. But I like to think she knew somehow. I filled the mug with coffee, black and strong, and carried it to the window wall. The sky was just beginning to lighten, deep blue giving way to softer shades at the horizon. On the runways below, lights twinkled like fallen stars. A plane taxied slowly into position, one of mine now. The thought still felt surreal. 3 weeks had passed since that day on the flight, since Harper's slap and the chaos that followed. 3 weeks since I'd crashed the board meeting and exposed Hadley's scheme. The media frenzy had barely begun to die down. My PR team was still fielding interview requests, and my lawyers were managing the civil suits being filed by other passengers who'd been targeted. I sipped my coffee, feeling the warmth spread through me. The mug's chip pressed against my lip, a familiar, comforting imperfection. Below, the plane began its takeoff roll, gathering speed until it lifted gracefully into the air. I watched it climb, banking gently as it turned toward its destination. Another followed soon after, then another. The morning ballet of departures had begun. My phone buzzed on the counter behind me. Eloise, already at work despite the early hour. "Morning," I answered, eyes still on the sky. "You're watching the planes again, aren't you?" I could hear the smile in her voice. "Guilty." "Well, I thought you'd want to know. The last of Hadley's team resigned this morning. Sent an email at 4 a.m. Probably hoped to avoid facing anyone." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Smart move. Not that it'll help him when the civil suits start." "The board approved your new diversity initiative, by the way, unanimous vote." "Good." I took another sip from the chipped mug. "And the passenger compensation program?" "Also approved. We can start reaching out to affected customers next week." The sky had lightened further, pink and gold streaking across the horizon. Another plane lifted off, silhouetted against the sunrise. "You know," Eloise said after a moment, Most new owners would be focused on profit margins and stock prices, not making things right. I smiled faintly. Most new owners didn't have to fight their way into the boardroom. True enough, she paused. The FBI called again. They want your testimony for the criminal case. I'll be there, whatever they need. We wrapped up the call, and I returned to my quiet contemplation. The sun had fully crested the horizon now, bathing the airport in golden light. More planes climbed into the brightening sky, sleek metal bodies carrying hundreds of lives, thousands of stories. My planes, my airline, not just a business acquisition anymore, but a responsibility, a chance to ensure no one else endured what I had. I traced my finger around the chip in my mother's mug, remembering her words when I'd accidentally dropped it as a child. I'd cried, certain I'd ruined something precious. "It's just a chip," she'd said, wiping my tears. "Doesn't change what's inside. Sometimes the things that get a little broken are the ones with the best stories to tell." I smiled at the memory, watching another plane soar upward. My phone buzzed again, the daily operations report. Soon I'd need to shower, dress, head to the office. There were meetings to attend, decisions to make, a company to reshape. But for now, in this quiet moment between night and day, I allowed myself to simply be, to breathe, to savor the ordinary peace I'd fought so hard to win. The coffee in my mother's chipped mug had cooled slightly, but I drank it anyway, savoring the bitter richness. Beyond the gleaming window, planes continued to climb into the morning sky, planes that now soared under my watchful, unbowed gaze. I smiled quietly, already planning what would come next. New training protocols, revised customer service standards, a complete overhaul of the security procedures that had been weaponized against passengers like me. But those were concerns for later. For now, I just watched the planes fly, each one a promise kept to my younger self, to my mother, to everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong. They belonged now. I'd made sure of it. If you enjoyed this story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. If you enjoyed this story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.